I'm Beth Salcedo. I am the medical director at the Ross Center, and I'm here talking to Dr. Ali Haar, who is one of our child, adolescent, and adult psychologists in our New York office. Children, teens, young adults, what draws you to that population?
It's such an exciting group to work with. I always experience the intersection of all these different important life things that are taking place, like development and identity and relationships and independence and what do I want to do with my life in a really explicit way. And it's very cool to get to share in that with somebody and kind of be along for the ride and offer support in kind of figuring out like, who am I? What do I want things to look like? I'm gaining more agency in decision making and in being kind of in the driver's seat of my life. And people are utilizing therapy in these really interesting ways to kind of figure out what they want. And when I get to do that work with them, it feels like a real honor.
I know you work with a lot of mood and anxiety disorders. How would you say you work with people to give them hope in situations where they're really suffering?
I really appreciate that question because that is the place when a mood disorder is really impairing someone's life, that hope can get dimmed. And that definitely becomes, I think, one of the cornerstones of the clinical work is if we don't have a lot of hope, then everything else kind of feels like we're putting the cart before the horse. And so what I really like to focus on is what can we do really tangibly that would make your quality of life better, right? Like sometimes I think people come into therapy and they think, well, insight has to precede action. No, that's just one way of doing it. Sometimes action precedes insight and we can learn and experience, a better quality of life before we fully understand why or how that's happening. And so I really like to work with people on tangible, small goals to increase quality of life, to feel like there's a sense of agency that they can make change in their life. And usually that's connected to a sense of hope. And it's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful to get to see people who have these difficulties in their life just kind of have these building blocks of rebuilding the things in their life that they miss or they want.
I know that you often will encourage patients to do things between sessions, maybe homework, or
Mhm.
can you say a little bit about that and why that's important?
I want to come up with a new word for it, but homework is totally accurate. But I think sometimes people are like, but I'm not in school and now there's more homework. But therapy is ideally this great, consistent 45 minutes in somebody's week. But there's a lot of time outside of therapy that is a springboard if we want to utilize it to take the skills that are learned and explored in the session and then be able to try them out. And ideally, it's not about success or failure. I think a lot of times it's just about the trying and then coming back into the session and being able to be like, what went well? What didn't? Great, we can work with this. But feeling like they're taking what is learned in session and bringing that into their lives is to me what therapy is. It's not that just little 45-minute experience. It's how do I take this and internalize it?
If someone said, I'm interested in working with you, how do they know if it's a good fit?
Hmm. Yeah, that's sometimes I think it's a really clear set of things, and other times it's like, I like you, I don't like you, right? It could be that gut
Yeah.
check. But I think if I was to describe some of my approach, it would be with enthusiasm, with humor, as very collaborative. I am, have some level of training and skill, but the person who's coming in is an expert in themselves. And so we're each kind of approaching that, I think, with our skills or the limits of what that is.
How does someone know if they're in therapy that it's working?
Yeah. So something I really like to bring into the therapeutic space is supporting people and trusting themselves if they don't feel like that's something they have already, because I think that's a really large underpinning of a lot of the other things that can arise in places where there's difficulty in relationships or struggling with our own sense of self. So in trying to figure out how is therapy working, one, starting at the first session, I'm going to ask you, what are your therapeutic goals? And sometimes people are like, what? And I'm like, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out together. And other times people are like, this, and this. So on a very concrete level, we are talking about this in the first session. And I think there's also this sense of like, quality of life is also that sense of, even if it's not an explicit clinical goal, I think that's like a strong factor in what many people are seeking.
Okay, great. And then last, what would you say is the most meaningful part of what you do?
It's a beautiful thing to watch people have a better quality of life or feel more connected to themselves or others or achieve really explicit goals. And I feel honored to get to walk with people along.